So today, we'll be talking about unlocking the teenage brain in order to improve mental health. Okay, so welcome. And so again, we'll give a little bit more information about who we are, where we come from, and our path in science and in our careers. So we've set up a timeline for you all to see, see who we are. And so, of course, I myself, and so as Dr. Cho and all of you guys probably have started off in elementary school, and then we'll make our way to high school. And then along the way, you might find yourselves in different internships or like college readiness programs down the road, or different jobs that you're interested in. And then everyone has this big idea of college and what college would be like. And so I attended a 4-year institution, and I can go through that later on how that was for me and share my experience with that. I'd be happy to do that as well. And right now, I am invested in postgraduate work, working with Dr. Cho. And so this is work just geared towards what I'm interested in based off of my degree from my 4-year institution. And so I'll let Dr. Cho continue down the timeline here.
Great. So Allea's graduated from college and she's joining me and working in the lab with me. And then after I graduated college, I actually went to more school. So I decided to get a medical degree or an MD degree as well as a PhD degree. So that means I went to graduate school as well as medical school. And that was because I wanted to learn to be a doctor, but I also wanted to be a scientist and do some research. So I got both degrees. You don't have to get both degrees to do research, but I ended up doing that. After that, I have to do more training. So I did some more training and learning how to be a doctor better. And that's called the residency, where I saw patients every day and worked with other doctors who are ahead of me. And then after I completed my residency, was hired at Yale as an assistant professor. So that means what I do with most of my time is I see patients, I see kids and teenagers, I also see adults for psychiatric care, but I also run a research lab. And the research lab that I run is really interested in understanding development and brain development, because we really want to understand what in the brain can we figure out that can help us understand why some teenagers develop psychiatric illnesses. And that's kind of what we're interested in. And that's what we'll talk about here today. So our mission for the lab is really to study the teenage brain in order to improve the mental health of children and teenagers. So you could do this in a number of ways if you were interested in mental health, if you were interested in understanding development in teenagers. You could be a clinician and you could provide clinical care, which is some part of what I do with some of my time. What we'll mostly focus on today is also the research aspect. So what I do is Allea and I use MRIs, which help us take pictures of the brain. We also ask people to do certain things while they're in the scanner so we can see which parts of the brain are actually active when they're doing things like remembering or thinking. It's a very smooth looking brain. We've touched it up just a little bit. And that'll help us really understand the development of the brain as children develop, and as well as understanding why some children might develop psychiatric illnesses.
Okay, so we want this to be very interactive. So we have a discussion question for you guys to kind of kick our talk off. So for the first question we have, what is mental health? And so you guys can use the chat and just answer this. What is your definition of mental health? What do you think it means? And yeah, we can discuss that. So I'll give you guys about a minute or so to respond.
Great. I really like a lot of these answers. That's right. I'm seeing a lot about balancing emotions. I'm seeing a lot about the brain being healthy mentally, making sure that your brain and emotions are healthy. And I also see some statements about medical health as well. So yes, I think everyone is on the right track, which is basically, really understanding how people are feeling, how you yourself are feeling, how your mind is working. And in terms of the health part, realizing when things are maybe not working as well as they could. So both the emotional piece as well as the thinking piece and how you're reacting to things around you and people around you.
Yes, so we'll visit those again. But we want to ask, why is it important to learn more about mental health, right? And so we might know a little bit, we might hear things in the media or in different areas, but we might not know why it might be important to learn more. And so one of the main reasons we should discuss is being self-aware. I know I'm always on like Instagram and things like that, and you guys may see things on YouTube or different games that may talk about being self-aware and focusing on things like self-care, both for ourselves and others. So we want to ask the question, am I okay? And so, are you having a good day, a bad day? And what does it mean to just have a bad day versus, having a lot of bad days in 1 week and things like that. And so in order to do that, we need to focus on things like stress. So everyone has stressful days. You might have a hard day at school. Things might be getting hard for you at home. It could be a wide variety of different things that's going on. And we want to know why it might be important to be able to manage the stress so that we can always come back to the question of making sure that we're okay. And then in doing this, it can also help our relationships with our family members and even friends, or if you have sisters and brothers as well. So making sure that, we're okay. And making it also okay to talk about with your family and your friends as well, because they might also be having bad days. Okay, and then more so kind of on the side of what Dr. Cho and I work on in the lab is having an accurate diagnosis. So what this just means is that we want to make sure that we know what's going on. So like I said, there can be a lot of different things that's going on each and every day. You might be experiencing different moods. I know one of you guys brought this up in the chat. And so it's important to know what exactly is going on, because mental health can be pretty complicated to learn about and to discuss, and even just to talk about every day. Okay, and then also more so what we do in the lab and what our lab focuses on is in identifying correct treatments. So again, we want to have a pretty good idea of what is going on so that we are able to help others. And so that's our main goal, is to help others feel better. And we want to know how we can do that. And so in order to do that, we need to learn more about the brain. And that means designing better treatments, things like that. Dr. Cho, I don't know if you want to add anything to this one.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think, the whole thing is that the diagnosis is really important. And when we say diagnosis, what we really mean by that is, what do we think is going on with a child or teenager? And once we have a better idea of what we think is going on with a child or teenager, we can steer them to the more appropriate treatments. Our treatments that we have currently are pretty good, but they could be better. So part of what we work on is trying to understand what the brain is doing. And if we can understand what the brain is doing, maybe we can design better treatments. So that's part of what we work on.
The fastest. All right, so again, yes, so the poll questions are anonymous, and we'll get started with the first one. Okay, so the first question is, where do you get the most information about mental health?
Okay, so we'll start commenting when like 75% or so of you have responded. So it looks like doctor is slightly ahead, which I'm surprised about, but that's good. Social media is second. I'm not super surprised about that. Family, it sounds like, is next. And then books and friends with TV and movies at the end, it looks like. So that's really interesting. That's helpful for us to know. And we always want to know where people are getting their information from.
Thank you guys for answering those. Let's see.
We'll go to the next poll then.
All right. So would you feel comfortable reaching out to someone, or maybe?
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. We've got more than 75% who've responded. So yeah, we've got a significant number of people saying yes, some people saying no, and also a large number saying maybe. And so, yeah, these are sensitive topics. These are not easy things to talk about when you're feeling like you're struggling or things are difficult. And I think a number of you commented on it. It depends on who that is. And that certainly is the case to be able to identify someone in your life that you think you can turn to, and that you feel comfortable turning to. And what I would also encourage people who feel like they wouldn't feel comfortable or don't know who to think about, who to turn to just spend some time thinking about it. I think it's hard for everybody. So when people are struggling with psychiatric illnesses or mental illnesses, these are difficult for everybody. But usually there are people who want to help and want to understand what's going on and want to make things better.
So we can move on to the next one. Okay, yes. So some of you guys already got to this in the chat. But who would you first turn to if you needed help? So family, friends, guidance counselors, or coaches or mentors.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that poll. It looks like most of you answered family. 52% answered family, then followed by friends and guidance counselors and coaches or mentors. So then, again, I think just sort of thinking about who would I turn to? Who are the adults or friends that I trust? It's important to think about, especially when maybe you're not at a point where you need help, but it's important to think about those things. Okay, great. So I think these are the poll questions for now.
Yes, those are.
Great.
Yep. Okay. All right. And so another discussion question we have here. So how is mental health important for your age group? Okay, and so again, you can write your answers in the chat, but we want to know what you guys think about this question here.
Yeah, these are all really fantastic answers. Yes, you're rapidly developing. Your brains are rapidly developing. The suicide rates, unfortunately, are very, very high in teenagers. They are high. They're the second leading cause of death for teenagers in this age group. So the suicide rates are high, and unfortunately, they are going even greater. There's a lot of emotional changes that happen at this age, someone's highlighting, as well as social changes. So you're all sort of, maybe finding new friends or getting closer to your friends and understanding how important friends are, because you need to know about yourselves is an extremely important goal that we all work on, even grown-ups of our lives, getting to know ourselves better. Hormonal development, yep, as you're developing in puberty, that's also really important and contributes to your mental health as well. Yes, you guys are great. These are all fantastic answers. That's right. So it sounds like you are really, really understanding of how important mental health is for people in your age group, which is great.
That's great. Okay, so I think we have another discussion question also. Yes. All right. So, yep, so we kind of talked a little bit about this and we want to know what you guys think. So what is the difference between having a bad day and having a need to reach out for help? So same thing, just you can write your answers in the chat.
Great. These are also really great answers. Right. So people are pointing out that a bad day can be just sort of a single event. Maybe it's short-lived. But when things start being long-term or things start to be hard longer term, or you feel like it gets more serious, are times to reach out for help. When events are life-changing, yes, these are all really great answers. Great.
All right. And I think we have one more. Okay, so we would like to know what are some of the names of mental health illnesses that you may have heard of. A lot of you guys said that you've heard from your doctor or social media. What are some of the names of mental health illnesses that you've heard of?
Yep, these are all, you guys know a lot of types of illnesses that you've heard of. It sounds like depression, Alzheimer's disease. I see triskaidekaphobia. I think that's a fear of the number. Is it 13? I'm trying to remember. It's not like an official illness, but it is one of those phobias, which fall under anxiety disorders, which I'm seeing here. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Yep, PTSD. I see here. OCD. Yep, I see a lot in here. Great, great. Eating disorders, psychotic disorders, including schizophrenia. Wonderful. Great. Great.
Oh yeah, that was a really great list. Thank you.
Excellent.
So, so yeah, so you guys, again, a really great and long list. And so we may hear of these things. And so we might know that a lot of them are quite common. So we'll see that they're common. They impact a lot of individuals at all age ranges. So again, children, teens, and adults. And then it would be important to note that they can be quite debilitating, meaning that they can have quite a create quite a burden on someone's life and their everyday routine per se. So they're not their normal selves per se, or they're just, it's really hard for them to take on. And we can talk about that more also. And then, as I mentioned before, they can be quite complicated to figure out just the illness itself, as well as what may be going on, socially, as Dr. Cho talked about earlier, and a whole bunch of different aspects that can speak to the mental illness. Okay, and so yeah, so we listed some here, and so you guys actually listed all of these ones, and so you guys may have heard of and even know the definitions behind depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. So really quickly, depression. So I think someone did say that this is a mood disorder, right? And it's known to cause persistent or very frequent feelings of sadness and loss of interest, meaning you're more sad than you may have ever been, and it's maybe very overwhelming interest in doing things that you may have found very pleasing beforehand, like playing video games, hanging out with your friends, eating, things like that, that used to cause you or the person experiencing depression some form of happiness, and they are not experiencing that anymore, so they've lost interest in this. Right, and then anxiety. So you guys also mentioned this. So it's excessive worry, and it's everyone can be worried about a variety of different things and may feel very anxious or panicky when doing different tasks, like maybe going up in front of the classroom to like write on the board, or even I'm a little anxious right now giving this presentation. So there's a whole wide range of this excessive worry that we might feel, but it's anxiety, when it becomes clinically concerning, is when you have this persistently as well, ongoing, and you might experience, are your hands sweating a lot? Are you just sweating? Or is your heart beating fast? And Dr. Cho, you can feel free to jump in to further explain as well. And then there's schizophrenia. And so you guys did mention that this is a psychotic disorder. So it's great that you guys know so much about this. And I also found it interesting at your age as well. And so we characterize this here as when people are having maybe disturbances in thinking, they're having different emotional responsiveness is kind of off, as well as just their overall behavior. And so how I want to describe this is, let's say if you're speaking to someone and it seems that their thoughts aren't really connected, or their experiences seem off, or just, yeah, there are certain experiences that they have seem a little off and you're not able to understand it. And it's just raising some concern to you. Yeah, but Dr. Cho, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so I think someone mentioned in here that they had never heard of schizophrenia before, and I think the main thing is schizophrenia is it's a psychiatric illness that comes about like other psychiatric illnesses do, commonly in late adolescence and early adulthood, and usually is marked by people experiencing hearing voices or thinking things, the kind of strange thoughts that other people might not think either. Panic disorder is a form of anxiety. So when we say anxiety, there are lots of different types of anxiety disorders, and panic disorder is one of them. Someone had mentioned agoraphobia, which is, the fear of not being able to escape if you're in certain situations. So sometimes people get really worried about being in movie theaters. Sometimes people with agoraphobia don't like to go to movie theaters. They don't like to drive over bridges or even be in grocery stores, things like that. Panic attacks are also associated with a lot of anxiety. And I think Allea was describing some of those symptoms, getting really sweaty, heart racing, feeling like something terrible is going to happen. Sometimes those happen out of the blue, and sometimes they happen because they're triggered by certain things that cause anxiety.
All right. So switching gears a little bit. So we thought it would be a good idea that I show you guys kind of my path here. And so I drew steps, and they're just steps on my journey to science and how I got to where I am today. And I think a lot of these points will be very interesting for you guys to hear, and also take note of for yourself when you're going through school. And so one of the first questions I asked myself is, what am I good at? And so I was always good at math when I was younger, and I took that and I ran with it. And there were some things that I maybe was not the best at, but I may have been interested in it. So I seeked all of my interests, and how you do that is getting involved, right? Being involved in a different number of clubs and sports and a lot of different activities. And you may hear, it might be a good idea to become well-rounded, just so that you're not blocking anything out that you may have thought of that, like, oh, I'll never do this. And so that's fine, but also we want to make sure that we're learning different things and seeking different things that we may have not known of before, and to see if that we're interested in it. And so very early on, I was very blindsided to everything else. And I really just wanted to become a forensic psychologist. And I really found out about forensic psychology in a lot of the TV shows I was watching, like Criminal Minds and like Law and Order, different crime shows, and very mystery based television shows. And so I wanted to become a forensic psychologist. And that's just someone who is a psychologist, but they're working mainly in the legal field, helping people that are in the court system who have a variety of mental health illnesses. And so in order to do that, I found out I did like a Google search, and I had to go to college. That's what Google told me. I would hear like my parents say, look, you should go to college. I wasn't really sure of what the what the correct route was to take. And so I just ended up in college basically as a first generation college student. And and so I went to University at Buffalo, and I was still seeking forensic psychology at the time. And very quickly, as soon as I got into college, I figured out that the field that I was interested in was very, very heavily linked to research. And so again, that's what Dr. Cho and I have been speaking about, us looking at the brain in different ways. And so it's very tied, psychology as a whole is very tied to research. And if any of you guys are interested in psychology, we can probably talk about that after as well. And so, I stayed involved, and I wasn't really sure if I would like research. So I got into a number of different programs to see where I would fit in. And so here's a picture of me. I think this is my junior year in an internship, or no, this was the my sophomore year in the summer. I did an internship, and this was me presenting my research here. Okay, and then I'd like to describe my whole journey so far as like a trial and error process. And so again, that's working through different things that you think you like, or and then you may not end up liking, and you gotta try to figure out where you fit in and where you want to go. Right. And this could be kind of fun. You ask yourself all these questions. I've thought about medical school, and you guys are in this science program. So I'm sure many of you may have been thinking about being a doctor. And so I've thought about maybe being interested in medicine and some of what Dr. Cho does as well. And I did want to finish school on time. So again, I went to a 4-year institution. Some people take 3 years, some people take 5. So I tried to sum it up and wrap it up in 4 years. And in order to do that, I wanted to make sure that I was effective moving forward, meaning that I wanted to get as much experience as I needed to within those years so that I can move on. And so here again, I'm in a lab, and this is more, this is closer to what I'm doing now. It's neuroscience research here. And if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer afterwards. Yep, so making sure I'm involved, that's where you see the several research internships. And this was an internship right here on the left. And then graduation, I was very excited to graduate and move on into my next endeavor in life. And then from here, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be forensic psychology. I was going to try to different aspects of psychology, but no longer really forensic psychology. And I wanted to more so get into neuroscience and different things like that. So I thought about other careers. And so I just graduated in May, you guys. And so now I'm working with Dr. Cho in our lab here, the Cho lab, and we're studying the things that we've discussed. So yeah, and so the rest is a big question mark. I don't know yet. We will see. So yeah, and then I'll let Dr. Cho, I think she's gonna do similar here. Oh, one more thing, I almost forgot. Very, very, very important tip. And I like to keep this in mind today is that you won't really know until you try it. And so I take that pretty seriously because I don't want to knock anything out and I want to get involved in as many things as possible. So I think you guys should too, stay involved and find out what you guys like the most. Okay.
Great. So like Allea, a series of questions and paths as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as well. And so in high school, I didn't really know what a psychiatrist was. I had no idea. I didn't know what research really was. So, in college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to study. I thought maybe I'd want to study to make drugs, to make pharmaceutical drugs. And so I majored in chemical engineering, but I found that I wasn't super interested in chemical engineering because I wanted to really work more with people. And so that was my first starting to question, what do I want to know more about? And I kind of wanted to know more about people. And at that time, I was also starting to do some theater and acting, and I was really interested in how people were behaving. And that was something that I wanted to know more about. And so when I started to ask myself, well, what am I good at? I was really good at sort of hands-on stuff. I was really good at lab courses. When I was taking science courses, I noticed that I was pretty good at that. I really liked to be hands-on. And so I ended up at medical school because I liked the science piece. And I also wanted to work more with people. And so I found that medical school was a really good fit for me because it really encompassed the things that I really wanted to learn more about and what I cared about, which was science and humanities, also combining sort of the personal touch and working with people, as well as really having a purpose. So meaning that I knew that what I was learning was important because I knew that I could one day use it to help people. So I found that really important for me. And then I was always asking myself, what am I willing to work at? Because everything is hard. So once you decide what you want to do, you have to put in a lot of hours and a lot of work. And you might not want to put in all those hours and all that work if you're not really enjoying something or you're not sure where it's going to end up. So I was pretty lucky that I was able to find something that I felt like I could work pretty hard at and understand. And so by the time I found that, which was in graduate school, and working on neuroscience and really trying to understand the brain, I had realized how important it was to find people, mentors who did what I thought I might want to do and who could help work with me. And so I was very lucky to be in graduate school and work with some other professors and doctors who were experts at understanding the brain and looking at the brains of different animals and looking at the brains of humans. And I really started to carve a path at looking at the brain, but also combining that with my clinical work as well and treating patients. So by the time I graduated from my medical school, I was kind of set on my path and really felt very lucky that I had been able to find a path where I was able to, both combine my interest in trying to help people in real time, which is what I do when I see patients, but also help people in the long term, which is what I do with research and trying to understand more about these psychiatric illnesses. And I ask myself these questions still to this day. I ask myself each of these questions and know that the answers to these questions might change as I ask these questions of myself.
Okay, so we also thought it might be good to kind of give you guys an idea. So we already gave you guys an idea of like kind of how we got to where we are, but we want to make it clear that some of your likes and dislikes or things that you're good at or that you care about don't always have to align just quite straight at what you think it might with your mentors or just with yourself. As Dr. Cho said, that her answers to her questions may change, and I'm still a big question mark sometimes. So it's good to lay this out here. So what I want to know more about myself. So I just know I want to know more about the brain and psychiatric illness. And I have a good idea of kind of where I want to go, but I'm not so sure of what the specifics are within psychology, other than neuroscience. Yeah.
And like Allea, I'm really interested in understanding the brain and how psychiatric illness impacts lives. And it's really because it's around people that I really want to know more about.
And then what am I good at? And so I know I'm good at asking a lot of questions and sort of mediating. So if there's a problem between two people or, two sides of a conversation, I'm kind of good at bringing it together in some way. And I'm still learning what I'm good at.
For me, I feel like I'm good at solving problems and working with others. I feel like that those are some of my strengths in terms of what I like to do and what I'm good at.
And then what do I care about? So this is very important. So what do you care about can usually drive what you're doing. And so one of the main things I care about is motivating both myself and others to keep going in whatever they're doing. So school, just life in general. I'm very big on motivation. And so, yeah.
And what I care about is making things better for others. So those are the things that I care about. And these are what drive me to do the work that I do. And so I see a few comments here in the chat about people saying they're not good at certain things. We all have things we're not good at. And I'm not good at certain things that my field requires as well. And so, sometimes you get around that by just trying and, working with people who are better at it than you are, and trying to improve some of those skills. Knowing that sometimes you have to work on those skills to be in a certain field. So that's some of the sort of reality. And, with science, I have to kind of get better at certain things, speaking, writing, reading, those kinds of things that I have to get better at. So that's where what am I willing to work for is really, really important here. What are you willing to put the hours in order to get better at what you want to do?
All right.
Okay, so we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about science here. So we touched upon this point a little bit earlier. I think people were talking about how the teenage brain rapidly develops, and that's exactly right. So the brain is developing throughout childhood and adolescence, and it really just continues to develop throughout your life. And what you see here is a video of the brain changing and developing. And so as you get older, throughout the teenage years and until early adulthood, the cortex of your brain, which is sort of like the outer part. So if you imagine like an orange and sort of the peel of the orange, that peel is like your cortex. And that gets thinner as you get older. And so, Allea, if you play the video one more time, what you would see here is that the red and yellow areas are starting to turn blue, and those are showing you the areas of the brain that are getting thinner. And the parts, I don't know if you can see the cursor, but the parts here next to the legend are the parts that are next to your forehead and the back. Yeah, like the prefrontal cortex exactly, are one of the areas that continue to develop as you get older and really into your early 20s. Okay, so what we're really interested in is understanding how motivation affects cognition. So we'll go into sort of what this means as we go into the presentation. But when we talk about motivation, what we really talk about is the force that drives you to do things, sort of that inner drive that you have that helps you understand what you want to do and go after what it is that you want. And then cognition is really an umbrella term that helps us sort of define the things about thinking, knowing, remembering, solving problems, and making judgments. So what do we know about motivation? Well, the first thing that's really important, especially for scientists, is that motivation is observable. So we can really tell when someone's motivated. So we put up this tweet here that someone put on Twitter, and what it says here, the person's labeled two pictures. On the left side, it says the first day of school, and on the right side, it's the second day of school, or second week of school, I'm sorry. And what you can see on the left side is he's pretty motivated. And he's dressed, he's got his water bottle, he has his backpack on, he's ready to go, he's outside. But in the second picture, he's kind of not motivated. He's kind of a mess, and he's kind of on the floor of his room inside, everything is just on the floor. So this is really important for us as scientists, because motivation being observable means that we can try to measure aspects of motivation. And so it's really important, and you can do this in your life too. You can tell when yourself or other people are motivated. So how does motivation get generated? So scientists think that motivation comes about from two things coming together. One is what you can see or maybe hear on the outside. So we call these cues, things that are sort of in your environment. And they might be visual cues, things that you might see. And these have to combine with how you're feeling on the inside. And these two things have to come together. And when they come together, this feeling of being motivated gets created. So an example of this that I put here is that you might see some ice cream, or you might see an ice cream shop and think, ooh, that would be really, really good. And all working together, and you might be remembering, or a child might be remembering when they last had ice cream, or when they had ice cream before, and what that felt like, and how nice that feeling was to eat ice cream. And so those two things together, seeing the possibility for having ice cream, as well as how you're feeling on the inside, really combine to maybe have a child sit still to get the ice cream, for instance, and be motivated. Okay, so the other thing I talked about earlier is how would we want to know how motivation affects cognition? Remember, I said that cognition is sort of this umbrella term that really encompasses thinking, remembering, problem solving. And the part of cognition that we're really interested in is called working memory. So working memory is really briefly defined as just keeping information in your mind. Okay, so for working memory, what this really means is that the examples are that you would keep information in your mind that you might need in a little bit. So some examples are, if I gave you my phone number or someone's phone number, and you didn't have your phone, or you didn't have a piece of paper to write it down, and you had to keep that in mind. Okay, so you had to keep that in mind until you were able to write it down. That's you using your working memory. If your parents are out for dinner, and they are writing a check or writing a tip, they have to do some arithmetic and calculations. So in order to do that, they have to use their working memory to keep all those numbers in mind. Finally, if you're getting lost and someone gives you directions, you have to keep that set of directions in mind in order to get to where you need to be. And that's also you using your working memory. And the reason we care about working memory is because it's what's called a building block of cognition, which means it's just a basic part of your cognition that helps you do more complex things, like solving problems. So we are going to test your working memory. Okay, so I'm going to say a number out loud. The number is 203-461-9387. And we're going to just have you keep that in mind. We'll ask you for that number later. Okay. Great. So how do we measure working memory in the lab? There are a lot of different ways that you can measure working memory in the lab. So what we do in the lab is we measure what's called spatial working memory. And what the participant does is they come in and they see a screen and they're asked to look at the little center O that's there. And what they will see at some point is that a colored circle will appear on the screen, and then the colored circle will disappear. So the colored circle disappears, and what we hope is that they're trying to remember where they saw that colored circle. And then after a period of time, it comes back. And when it comes back with a gray circle. And there's a joystick that the participant uses to move the gray circle to where they thought the yellow circle was. And so what we care about is sort of how closely do they move that gray circle to where they thought they saw that yellow circle. That's a measure of their working memory. Okay, so we're going to go back to that question. What was the number that I asked you to remember? Great. Okay, so a lot of people did answer the right answer, which is the first one. 203-464-9387. We did make these a little bit tricky intentionally, but you can see how much that you have to sort of actively remember some of these numbers in order to keep them in mind. And again, this sort of active keeping in mind this information really is your working memory. And you have all different kinds of information that you do keep in mind every single day when you're at school, when you're at home, when you're even hanging out with friends. And so this is just to share this example with you. Okay, so we talked a little bit about our task and how we measure the working memory in the lab in order to understand how people are remembering things. And we asked them to do this in the MRI scanner. We had talked about this a little bit before. So in the MRI scanner, so MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging. It allows us to take pictures of the brain. So almost like you had a camera and you're taking snapshots of the brain, which is really cool because it lets us see how the brain looks. We don't have to enter the brain. We don't have to do anything that really even involves touching the person, but we get to see these pictures inside of the brain. And that allows us to see what the brain looks like. There's no radiation involved. It uses some magnetic fields to take that picture. What we also use is what's called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. This allows us to see sort of what the brain is doing when people are doing things inside of the MRI scanner. So if the MRI is sort of like a picture, you can think of the fMRI as sort of like a video. It sort of tells us what the brain is doing and when it's doing it. So if we ask people to remember, spatial locations or other things, we can pinpoint where in the brain is helping them remember those things. And so what we get out of combining both a task that we ask them to do in the scanner, as well as the MRI, is we get to get these nice looking pictures that highlight where in the brain that's being used to remember things. So this is an example here that you see actually from the task that we just showed you. So in young adults, these are the regions that are supporting working memory, the areas that are listed here, that are described here in yellow and in red. Okay. And again, so this really does help us understand brain development. It helps us understand which parts of the brain are being active. And this is a common way that people study the brain from babies all the way to adults. Okay, so the other thing that we do in the lab is we're really focused on teenagers, as we had talked about before, teenage mental health and the development of the brain in teenagers. And so to do that, we work with teenagers, and we collaborate and advertise with clinics and schools, camps and communities to identify teenagers who could be interested in participating in our studies. And in our studies, we are working with adolescents who may have depression or schizophrenia, as well as adolescents who are typically developing. So as part of this, our study is really aimed at understanding how the brain develops in teenagers with depression and teenagers with schizophrenia, as well as how they develop in typically developing teenagers. And so what we usually look for when we're looking at teenagers who are interested in participating in our studies is that they're 13 to 17 years old. they're able to have an MRI. So an MRI, again, is pretty safe for teenagers, but it does require certain things. So we usually check that they don't have braces. If they have braces, we just wait till they come off at certain point. Certain times, usually braces are not permanent. Claustrophobia, it is a smaller space in there, as you saw, and as well as no metal in the body. And most importantly also is that their parents are okay with an MRI. We do work a lot with parents as well, because we do need the parents to consent to the study. As teenagers, you know, those of you who are under 18, you're able to what's called provide assent for a study, but your parents provide the consent. And then finally, we also see if they're right-handed, because some of these cognitive circuits in the brain regions are actually lateralized, meaning some of them are more often found on one side of the brain than the other side of the brain. Okay, and usually they reach out to us in order to express their interest at cholab@yale.edu. Okay, so the other point here is that we can learn a lot from a single research project. So, you know, we talked about sort of one of our projects that we work on here is, which is learning how motivation impacts cognition. And from that single research project that I talked about, we get some information about psychiatric illness, and we also get some information about neuroscience. We also get information about cognition, as well as working memory specifically. And then also motivation, fMRI. We also get information about the various psychiatric illnesses like depression, schizophrenia or psychosis, and the adolescent developmental period. And this really helps us understand developmental trajectories for teenagers. And remembering that the whole goal of what we're working on is, if we can understand something about how the brain works, maybe we can use that something to make a new treatment. And that's kind of what our goal is. Okay, so these are just some of the flyers that we use, again, to show, to find teenagers who are interested in our studies. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that awesome talk. I think we all learned a lot, and it's a super important topic. I think we have time for maybe a couple questions that I've been collecting from the chat. And these questions are for either of you, whoever feels like taking a stab at it. I'll start with, how is mental health connected to physical and emotional health?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the short answer is it is all connected. So the short answer is yes, it's all connected. So the sort of, I guess the very sciencey answer is that all of these connections are connected to your brain. So your brain sends a lot of, it has a lot of neurons that send connections down to your spinal cord, which from your spinal cord go to the rest of your body. And the rest of your body includes parts of your muscles, it includes parts of your stomach, includes everything in your body. So when you feel like, you know, the sort of fluttery feeling someone mentioned in the chat in your stomach, that comes from that connection between your brain and your stomach. And we also know that when people get really, really nervous, sometimes they have to go to the bathroom or other things. So we know that these connections are there just from our own observations. But we also know from careful scientific work that a lot of these connections are also directly linked, meaning there's highways between all these areas of your body. So the areas of your body are physically connected to each other. There are routes to get to every part of your body, and we can also observe these things as well.
That's super cool. Thank you. Okay, so we have time for one more question. Since everyone's brains are different, how do you define what a healthy brain actually is?
That's such an excellent question. So this is a question I think a lot of scientists ask themselves all the time. So it's a very highly scientific question. So, you know, a healthy brain is just something that we kind of came up with, right? Scientists artificially say it's a healthy brain. And the person who asked this question is exactly right. There's a lot of variation in our brain. There's a lot of variation in just the way the brain looks, not even the way it's functioning. But if you were to take pictures of, you know, 100 kids of their brains, at the very same age, maybe even they were born on the same birthday, you would see that their brains are slightly different. And we call this anatomic variation. So the anatomy means the way the brain is structured. But there's a lot of variation there that scientists are really still trying to understand. So when we say healthy in the lab, it is kind of artificial. What this means for our definition is we are studying teenagers who at that time when we're studying them do not have any psychiatric illnesses. It doesn't say anything about the future. People may develop psychiatric illnesses in the future, and that's just the definition for that moment in time. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for explaining that. I'm going to turn it over to Lam to close us out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Cho and Allea, for this amazing talk. I'm sure that everyone enjoyed this talk a lot and learned a lot as well. So before letting everyone go, I would like to say thank you, you guys, for an amazing year for exploring science. And we hope you guys enjoy learning a lot about the science that all these speakers has to give you. And we hope that we see you guys next year in 2022. And this will be the last event for Exploring Science for 2021, and we will be back on January 18th, 2022. But for now, please check out the link for the recording for our previous events. And yeah, that's all that I have to say. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we hope to see you guys next year.